Hello everyone, welcome to my July 2017 haul video. July is always a special month for me, and I think a special month for a lot of movie collectors, because it is the first month of the Barnes & Noble 50% off Criterion sale. They only happen twice a year, once in July and then the second time in November. And this year I picked up quite a few titles. Every time I say I'm not going to go crazy, but I did anyways. But before I get into all of those Criterion pickups, I want to show you all of the other non-Criterion things that I got in the month of July. First up being a stack of used books. Once again, I always tell people, go to your local used bookstores. You never know what you're going to find. First up is The Reader, which was turned into a film starring Kate Winslet. Second is Life of Pi, which was a film directed by Ang Lee. Next is Girl Interrupted, which is a film starring Angelina Jolie. Third is a book that was turned into a film that many people believe to be overrated and bloated, but I always love it, and that is The English Patient. The film by Anthony Minghella did win Best Picture, and I thought it was just exquisitely well directed. And last is a book that was not turned into a film, and that is a book called Ghost Soldiers, which was based on history, a Japanese POW camp. And now for all of the non-Criterion Blu-rays that I picked up in July. The first two are actually holdovers from June. I had put in an order for these on Amazon, and they were back-ordered, and I had to wait for them. And the first is Bad Day at Black Rock, starring Spencer Tracy, and this is directed by John Sturges. These Warner Archive releases that have been coming out recently are just gorgeous. They are 4K remasters, and they just look absolutely stunning. Next is Wait Until Dark, which is a film starring Audrey Hepburn, and I really love this film. I highly recommend checking this out. The next 5 titles are all from Kino Lorber Classics. This is a smaller distribution company that releases a lot of classic movies on Blu-ray. They've been releasing them for years, and in July they actually launched their own site called klstudioclassics.com, and they had a huge site-wide sale, and some of these were titles I've been wanting to get for a while, and I was just waiting for the prices to drop. The first up is a rebuy for me, an upgrade from a DVD, and that is Alfred Hitchcock's Lifeboat. This is one of his underrated films. This came out in 1944, and this is just a fantastic, fantastic movie. I highly recommend checking this out if you are a fan of Alfred Hitchcock and you want to see one of his films that is not as well known as his others. And coincidentally, the next film is also an Alfred Hitchcock film, but is even lesser known than Lifeboat, and that is The Paradeen Case. This is starring Gregory Peck. It was one that was sorely missing from my collection, and I'm so glad that Kino finally put it out on Blu-ray. Next is Miracle Mile, a film I haven't seen but have heard great things about, and I'm really excited to check this one out. Next is a Hal Ashby film that I've been hearing about for years and have been wanting to buy this Blu-ray ever since it came out, and that is Coming Home. And next is a film that I think is super underrated and I really can't recommend enough, and that is Hell in the Pacific, starring Lee Marvin and Toshiro Mifune. And this is directed by John Boorman, and this film is really unique. Basically, a US soldier and a Japanese soldier are stranded on an island, and they've been stranded there since World War II, and they have no idea that the war has ended, and they are still fighting that war. It is a really unique film. And next up is a Blu-ray box set of 3 films, the 3 films being the Sam Raimi Spider-Man films. They reissued these because of the new Spider-Man Homecoming movie to come out, and the reason why I bought this is because I have an older Blu-ray set with worse transfers, and of course the DVDs are inferior as well. And this also has a lot of the special features, actually I believe maybe all of the special features from those DVD sets, and also the first and third film in the series are both the mastered in 4K transfers, which look incredible. I believe the Spider-Man 2 is the older Blu-ray version. I think they're waiting to put these out in 4K, so look forward to that. And now, the moment I hope all of you have been waiting for is my July 2017 Criterion Sale Haul, and please bear with me, there are quite a few titles, so I'm going to go through them as fast as I can. If you want to see any of them in more depth, please let me know and I will do a review for them. First is Stalker, directed by Andrei Tarkovsky. This film is an absolute masterpiece. It's an absolute masterpiece of foreign cinema. It's an absolute masterpiece of all time. Highly recommended. Next is Sam Peckinpah's Straw Dogs. Highly recommend rebuying this if you already own it because this comes with great special features. Next is Kenji Mizoguchi's Ugetsu. This film is absolutely incredible. I highly recommend it if you are a fan of Japanese cinema, and if you're just a fan of ghost stories, definitely check this out. Next up is George Stevens' Woman of the Year, starring Katharine Hepburn and Spencer Tracy. If you are aware of these two on screen, they are one of the most iconic couples ever on screen. This is The Exterminating Angel, directed by Louis Buñuel. If you know who Louis Buñuel is, you know how visceral and surreal his films can be. Next is Mildred Pierce by Michael Curtiz, starring Joan Crawford in her only Oscar-winning role. This is an iconic film. This is a great film noir. I can't recommend this enough. Next up is another surreal film, and this is Rumblefish by Francis Ford Coppola. Definitely watch this as a double feature with The Outsiders. They were both shot back to back, they're both based on a book by the same author, and they're both dealing with youth culture. This is a really great under-the-radar Francis Ford Coppola film. Next up is Yasujiro Ozu's Good Morning. This is a great satire about the changing of time and the commercialization of our society. Next is John Huston's The Asphalt Jungle. This is an exquisite film noir caper film. A lot of the heist films that we have seen in recent years and recent decades take a lot of influence from this film. Next is another Hal Ashby film, that is Being There, starring the late great Peter Sellers, who I have always believed to be one of the greatest comedic actors of all time. He probably should have won an Oscar for this film. Next is another Hitchcock film, and that is The Lodger. This is a 1927 silent film. You can see a lot of the things that Hitchcock would later perfect in his films being done in here. I do recommend this. I know silent films aren't for everyone, but Hitchcock is the exception. Next is Michelangelo Antonioni's Blow Up. This is just a wonderful, thick set. It is one of his most well-known films. This film has been remade a couple of times, and it was remade most memorably in Brian De Palma's Blow Out, which came out in the 80s, starring John Travolta, but this is the original film, and this is just a gorgeous set. I love the red and the white. Continuing right along here with yet another stack, I have The Squid and the Whale, a film directed by Noah Baumbach. This is another DVD to Blu-ray upgrade that I really needed to get, so I'm happy I picked that up. The same thing can go for here is Punch Drunk Love, the Paul Thomas Anderson film starring Emily Watson and Adam Sandler. If you think that Adam Sandler is not a good actor, watch this film because it is probably his best acting you will ever see in his career. Next up is another Antonioni film, and that is Identification of a Woman. You can see that there's a bit of a trend going on in this video that I'm picking up a lot of titles from the same director, and that is because they're either upgrades or I'm just filling out the collection. Next up is Blind Chance by Keselowski. This is an early film by Keselowski. He's most famous for his Three Colors trilogy, The Decalogue, and The Double Life of Veronique, but this is a film that I'm really glad to add to the collection because I've actually never seen it. Next up is a bit of a blind buy. I've been looking at this one for years, but I finally was prompted to buy it because I read an article by the actress Illeana Douglas who just raved about this film, and that is Ride the Pink Horse, which is another film noir film, so I'm really excited to check this out for the first time. Next up is Lost in America, a film that is written, directed, and starring Albert Brooks. If you are a fan of Albert Brooks, I highly recommend checking this film out. It's a nice critique of American society in the 1980s. Next is Lindsay Anderson's If, which is a film starring Malcolm McDowell. This is a biting critique of British youth culture and British society in the late 1960s. After Stanley Kubrick saw Malcolm McDowell's performance, he wanted him in the title role in A Clockwork Orange. Next up is an underrated French horror film, and that is Eyes Without a Face. I saw this a few years ago and was just blown away by it, to the point where I needed this in my collection so badly that I just had to buy it this time. I couldn't put it off any longer. Next is another DVD to Blu-ray upgrade, and that is Pedro Almodovar's A Woman on the Verge of a Nervous Breakdown. If you are not familiar with Pedro Almodovar's work, I highly recommend you get into it. His films are funny, but they can also be dramatic and serious, and he is a very multi-talented director. He is so underrated. Next is another Antonioni film, and that is Le Amish. And this is an early film from Antonioni. The most of the stuff I have is from his 60s work, and this is from 1955, so I'm really interested to see what he was before his most well-known films of L'Avventura, La Notte, L'Eclise, stuff like that. And last, but certainly not least, is an upgrade from a DVD box set, and that is Roberto Rossellini's War Trilogy. These films are pretty much the reason why I loved foreign cinema. I watched these films a few years ago, and they are some of the greatest films you will ever watch. This is all part of the Italian neorealism genre, stuff that was shot on location with unprofessional actors, and it's some of the rawest, most real stuff you will ever see, and it's just incredible. And that is my July 2017 haul video, as well as all of the things I picked up at the Criterion sale at Barnes & Noble. If you like this video, please check out the other videos on my channel.